Brought to you by Cprime, an Atlassian Platinum and Enterprise Solution Partner, and an Atlassian Verified Vendor. Power scripts for Jira.
This video looks at writing conditions and validators with SIL. So I'm in my test project and I'm just going to edit my workflow. And I'll pick a status, we'll say done. And we'll go to add a validator. Like I said, validators are nothing new. But out of the box, which you're pretty limited to what validators you can add. So here you see SIL validator, which is an option that is added by PowerScripts. So instead of limiting ourselves just to these two basic permissions validators, we can create our own. We just hit add, and we can create a brand new script right here as part of this interface. And we can choose where it goes within our SIL manager so we can maintain our file structure. And I'm going to call this one comment required because that'll be the example validator that we're going to create. And then we already have our file created now, and now we just need to write the code. So like I said, we're going to require that a comment is added to this issue before it can be transitioned to done. Now if I hop over to the documentation and I'm on the customizing workflows page of the PowerScripts for Jira, and all we really have for a validator are these return codes. So we have three values for return code. We have a true false, which will trigger the validator. So if it's true, the user is allowed to complete the transition. If it's false, they're not allowed to complete the transition. The second parameter for this return code is the field which is triggering the validator, and the third is the message. So this one line, if we copied that, this could be our validator. However, there's nothing you could ever do to make it true and ever allow the transition to go through. So we need to put some conditional logic in there. So normally what I like to do is create a string error message, and we can create our own custom error message that is going to be displayed to the user when the validator is fired. Okay. Then I like to just use the variable name down here. I just think it's cleaner, gets it out of the way. So normally what we do is we put the validator in an if condition. So if whatever condition you're checking for is true, return false with the error. We can add that second condition of comment. Oops. Now, a useful way to do the comparison in our if statement here is with this HasInput function. And it checks not only if the value has been entered and saved into the ticket, but also the value of the field on the screen. However, its use is limited, and it should really only be used on transitions that require screens. So I happen to know that the workflow I'm working on now doesn't have a transition screen, so I'm not going to use this HasInput function, but we'll see an example almost identical to the one I'm doing now later in the documentation that uses HasInput, and that's the big difference, is the fact that I'm not using a transition screen. So instead, I'm just going to use this get all comment IDs. And all this is going to do is return the comment IDs for the issue. But that's okay, because we don't need the value of the comment. We don't need the text that goes in the comment. We just need to know if a comment exists or not. So that's what we'll do for this example. Not necessarily make them enter a comment on the transition screen, but just make sure there's a comment on the ticket in general. So we're going to get all comments by IDs for key. And we could just say, and since we are within the context of an issue, we can just write key, and that will return the issue key for the variable. And just as a reminder, what that means is this validator can only fire for a specific issue at a specific point in the workflow. So because of that, it's kind of a given what the issue already is, and we don't need to specify which issue we're using. So then I can just do array size, which is another routine. It's an array routine, and it just returns the numeric value of the array. I think you can also use size as a alias. And we'll just say if array size comments is greater than 0, let's just say is less than 1, because this is the false. Return false. The calling field is comment, and we're displaying the error. And that's it. So now we just hit next and finish. We need to make sure we publish our workflow. I'm not going to create a copy. And we're back at our project settings. So now I'm going to go into this issue I already have set up, which I'm pretty sure uses the same workflow. Let me just check that. Okay, same workflow. And now I have no comment on the issue. And if I'm lucky, and I hit done, there we go. It says you must add a comment to the issue before you can complete this action. We also get this system message. If we were to do this with the transition screen, we wouldn't get that lower message. But notice that the message is custom. It's what we specified. Now if I say, here is, here's my comment, and I try the same thing, it'll go through because I've added a comment. So that's the basics of validators. Now if I come back here to my SIL manager, I'm going to refresh, go to my workflow validators, comment required. The syntax, or the way we construct this validator, is inherently very simple in the fact that you just have an error message, an if statement. You don't even need an else statement. You don't need a return true. It's just kind of given that if you don't return false, then it's true, it's good to go. So we have this return, false, comment, error. Very simple syntax. However, what we can do with it has nearly unlimited possibilities because of the other routines within Jira that let us get pretty much any information we need to know about the user, the issue, and the project. Here's what I mean by that. So I'm going to jump back over to the documentation for where we had our get all comment IDs. I'm going to go down to this Jira integration page, and we're just kind of going to scroll through some of these routines and see what kind of information we can get. So we can get information about the current user's name, also his email. We can get the history of fields, so we can see if a field was edited or changed recently. We can get comments, which we've already started to do. So we got an array of all comments by ID. Then we could use this second routine where get comment by ID, where we could get the actual metadata about the comment, including the text, the author, and the date. Get the last comment. Get project roles by name. This is a huge one for permissions. This is one way you would check if a user. Oh, this just returns the ID. But you can check to see if a user's within a project role. And if I just skip down to there you go, users in role, users in groups. So you can also check if there's in groups to see if they have specific permissions. So this is just kind of a good segue into all these other routines you can call to get information. So now I'm going to jump back over to another documentation page. So we were on this customizing workflows page, but there's this other great page just on validators that has a bunch of examples of some use cases that you would have for validators. So we see this one, which is forces the user to enter a comment during a transition, which is almost the example I used, but it has this HasInput routine. That's because they're using a transition screen with the comment field on there. We can also check the value of a single field, verify that value. Check the status of the parent issue. So before you can, I don't know, close the subtask, make sure the parent is in a specific status. Validation based on a regular expression. So you can, in this example, they're checking the format of a social security number field to make sure it's in the proper format. And if it's not, it displays message to the user. Force a field to be required before completing the transition. Ensure that the issue has at least one attachment. You can check links. Well, this is interesting. This is preventing a transition from being executed if the rest of issues in the project aren't closed. I don't know why you would want to do that, but you can. Validators on mathematical expressions, validators based on date expressions, comparing two text fields, so you can check to see if the summary contains a certain value. Users aren't in a project role, custom field isn't initialized, meaning they didn't have an input in the custom field. Or check a user property. So, like I said, the use cases for this just go on and on and on. Another great resource for this, you can jump over to the tutorials and recipes space and get different examples of other validators with videos. Validator for the component lead, Yeah, and you can see videos on how each individual script is written. So very, very powerful. Validators are honestly one of the first things people go to when they look for power scripts or find power scripts. It's kind of the lander for power scripts are custom validators. So that being said, they're very powerful, and it's definitely one of the first things you should get to know. Alright, so now we're going to talk about conditions. We've already looked at validators. Now we're going to look at conditions. And we don't need to spend a whole lot of time on conditions because they're so similar to validators in how they're created, how the script works, and how they're used, and what the possibilities are. The big difference is a condition does not have an error message. So we eliminate two of the return codes. So because there's no message and there's no specific field firing the message, because if a condition is working, the user doesn't even see the status button to begin with, the transition button to begin with, so they have no idea that they're not allowed to see something. So that's why, so we don't return a message, so all we need to do is return a true or false. So if I were to go back to my SIL manager, and let's just say for some reason I decided not to even show them the transition button if there wasn't an attachment in this condition, in this example, I could just get rid of the error message and get rid of these two return codes, and that would be my condition. And I can add it the same way by editing my workflow. This time we'll do in progress and conditions. Add condition. Well, there's a lot more built-in conditions natively in Jira than there are validators, but here's our SIL condition where we can just come in and write our script or pick a pre-existing script. And like I said, the only thing you need to do differently for a condition than a validator is just return a true false value, but all the other routines work the same way. It's typically built within an if statement, and we just return a true false. Now, I want to take this time to show you a very useful tool within PowerScripts, one that I found myself using before creating this video. I needed to know if the workflow I was going to use for the example already had any conditions or validators on it, so I could avoid those transitions altogether or even avoid the workflow altogether. Now you can certainly go into the workflow and view the workflow and then go transition by transition to see if there's a condition or validator just by coming to this screen and checking for them here. But that could be quite time consuming. So there's this really great tool. I don't use that often, but when I do use it, it's certainly filling a need I can't get anywhere else. It's called this workflow viewer. And what it does is it breaks down your workflows for you and shows you what scripts and fields are being used where. So if I go into my test project and I pick my task workflow, and I can choose between the published workflow or a draft workflow, and I can here's a validator on the create transition, and I can either just show the path to the validator, or I can show the actual code by toggling this button here. And what it lets me do, let me move my window over so you can see more of this. Well, I'm not going to fit it all in there, but hold on. Let me squish my window. Alright, that's better. Yeah, really nice. So I can scroll down and I can see the different transitions, and I can see all the post functions. We don't have any scripted post functions in here yet. And I can see all the scripts that I have. And I can even see standard screens. And if there were transition screens, it would show me the fields I'm using on each transition screen. And I tell you, if you need to find something, this is the fastest way to find out what's going on with your workflows. It's the fastest way I've found, and it's just a really helpful tool. So just kind of be mindful that it's there. And that is it.